Well, for as long as we've been doing quick tips, I think this is the first time that the person who requested the tip has gone to these extremes in order to guarantee that I will do the tip. This person says, can you please explain and demonstrate how the sun hits the surface of the water, penetrates the water to cast shadows on rocks and logs, casts shadows on the water's surface, reflects off the surface of the water areas, and also allows a view underwater. Pretty big request there, isn't it? Well, it's a simple answer. What's it doing, but what do your eyes see? Well, after receiving the email from this person making that request, I answered, can you send me a photo that has all these things in it so I can know more specifically what you're talking about? Well, the person asking for the tip couldn't find a photo that had all that in it. So I think for the first time in the history of our quick tips, the image that we'll be working from is a generated photo. The guy went to ChatGPT and put in the request. The photo came up. Not this one, you'll see it in just a moment. But before we go there, I want to point out something to you, and that is that water is going to, things that are underwater are going to be distorted in some way because what's happening with the water, its movement, just the fact that we've got water itself between us and whatever's there is going to distort the image just a little bit. And then we've got these other things that enter into it. You know, what time of day is it? What's the situation? Is the scene in shade or is it in full light? All kinds of things can happen to cause it to appear in different ways. How much is the water moving? And how much are the rocks totally submerged? All those kinds of things. And then on top of that, the person asked for shadows. And so I thought, first of all, let's just zoom in here and look in this photo that you can see the difference. You can see how the rocks here under that water are distorted. So we have what is it doing? What's the water doing to it? But then the way to be able to paint that is to diagnose it according to what the eye is seeing. And those are two different things. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Now right here we can see the rocks more clearly. We can tell that some of them are underwater, but we can tell it's really shallow. And because it's really shallow, we don't get quite the distortion, but notice what's happening. These that are obviously underwater are a little darker in value. That's what the eye is seeing, not rocks underwater. And that's where a lot of people make, I want to say, miss the point. If you're trying to paint rocks underwater, if that's your focus, it's crapshoot. But if you narrow it down to what is your eye seeing, then you can analyze it according to its visual structure, and then you can do it every time. So you can see here, this one, you see the edges are softer. The water is softening the edge. The edge here is softer than we feel the edges and the ones that are above the water. And we can see also these appear darker in value. You see this one right here especially, darker in value than those that are above the water. So there are two things there. Now I want to take you to the computer, the AI generated photo that our person requesting the tip generated, and you can see it has some of those elements in it, but it has some other things too. Now we have a scene that's in shade, obviously in shade. We have some of the trees, the foliage on the trees reflecting in the water and reflecting and really in these areas where the water is in between the rocks. We have some of the rocks that are submerged, and we have moving water on top of rocks that are submerged right here. That's what it's doing. But what do you see? You see the difference there? All right, what we see is what I'm going to try to show you how to do. If we don't analyze it according to the visual characteristics, the visual elements, then we'll just be guessing. So let's look at it in terms of the value scale. What do we see? If I put the value scale here, well, let's just look in these areas right here where it's really distorted. These areas don't seem to be in water, but the activity closer to what the person was describing seems to be in this area right here. So if we put the value scale here and we say, what do we see in terms of the value scale? You can see that these areas back here, value-wise, are in the middle to light value area. We can see where the light is reflecting there and where the water is moving. It's the value is in this area. And you can see here where these rocks are underwater, we can see both. You see the lighter values right in here, and then we can see a little bit darker, but you see underwater, they're not as dark as the shadows are here, where it's not underwater. So what did I just describe to you? I described to you something about value and the degree of value. Now that's one of the first things that you look for when you're observing what your eye is actually seeing. Look for the various values and what those values are doing. And then of course we have the element of color. So I've named two things already that we look for. What is the color that you're seeing? And what is that color doing? Well, and we go to the color. If we go to the color wheel, I'm really breaking that down. If we go to the color wheel and I put the color wheel here, I'm seeing there is a very narrow range of colors. I'm seeing some colors that are falling in the yellow to yellow-green range right in here. And and the person was asking for water, so we're not going to do the whole thing. But we see that is kind of in between yellow and yellow-green, but it's not this saturated. It's a desaturated. So that tells us that that's what we're looking at there. And value-wise, this yellow is the same, or in the similar value range as the colors around it, which are more in the blue range. You see that right there. So if I rotate the color wheel around that, I'm seeing, you can see that we have blues that lean towards blue, and we have blues that lean a little bit towards green, very desaturated. So we have information there that we can use. So we've talked about color, we talked about value, and let's talk about edges or shapes. The shapes there, these shapes are very diffuse. That means you would blend to make those shapes. And as the shapes get closer to us in this area where there's not so much moving water, the shapes are clearer, but the edges are still soft where it's underwater. Now I've described to you that just those characteristics, and let me just show you how, just a very quick little way here, just in this area right here, of how we take that information and translate it into paint. Now, I always like to get on the palette a value range of the colors that I can see, or the colors I know that I'm going to need in order to translate what I'm seeing there. So if we're just looking at this area right in here, say if we're just looking in this area, this moving, it's indistinct. They're really the edges are all blended there. The only difference is what you might say color, but other things are kind of indistinct. So if I started then in that area, if I wanted to do a little study, I started there in that area, I would want to come up with this color, and I would start with blue. And I would start with what value of blue am I looking at. If I have my value line, like I have in my palette here, I said middle, so I go into the middle value area. And just with my palette knife, I can hold that up and I'm seeing, well, it really is a little bit lighter than that. So I pull a little bit more light into it. go over into the lighter version. It's going to need just a little bit more white there. Lighter version, there's the value. But I can see it's more desaturated than that. So, to desaturate a color, we add its complement. And I have the complement right up here with blue-orange. This is a desaturated orange, or red-orange. So let's see if that will do it. And so we'll just pull some of that in there and keep that blue. And you see it desaturated. And hold that there. And you see we've got that range. And we see that it is, well, it really does vary on the saturation. So how I would translate that then, right over here, would pick up that in the brush. In fact, I really prefer mixing it in the brush once I find the values, and once I detect which hues or colors are in those values, I prefer loading it in the brush. You see, if I hold my brush up here, you see that is very similar, even more, maybe a little bit more desaturated than that. So we just do it according to what our eyes are seeing as color, and what that color is doing, not as water, not as moving water, but simply shapes of color. And so if I'm doing this little area right here, I would see I probably need to do something about like that, because I see this sort of movement in there. So I might need to do something like that. If it needs to be a little bit bluer or a little darker, then I move over and pick up a little bit darker, a little bit more blue perhaps, and put that in. So, this might happen just like that. If you see it a little bit lighter, then I pick up a little bit more light, and I put that in, as we see happening right down there. In fact, down there, it's not only getting lighter, but it's losing more of its hues, getting a little bit more desaturated. So see, it's technique, which means how you move the brush, how you load the brush, how you move the brush. It's observing what it's visually doing. Visually, it's doing this, and then it's observing what you're looking at visually. What are you picking up? What do you need to pick up in order to make that happen? Now, what about the yellow that's beside it? I'm going to rinse the brush off. That yellow that's beside it, I described that as a yellow that's leaning towards green. If you listen to yourself describe things when you're describing them visually, you'll be surprised how that will give you information as to what you need to do. So if I say yellow leaning towards green, that's what I need. If I say yellow leaning towards green that is desaturated, that's what I need. And so, and in that value range, so then the yellow leaning towards green. So I'm just going to start right here. I've got this is a yellow orange that I've got gradated to a yellow. So I'm just going to start right there in that value range. And I said it's leaning towards green. Yellow plus blue makes green. So we'll do this. Now, is that light? Is that too dark? If I compare it to this, no, it's not. Well, yes, it is a little bit too dark. Does it need more yellow in it? Let's see. If it varies like that, it might need more yellow in it. Let's pull just a little bit of white down right here. It doesn't need to have. It needs to vary in value. All right. So when you describe those needs, what it needs, you describe those needs to yourself, and keeping that, you see, in the same value range, moving the brush in the same way, you see, then we begin to get that interpretation. And then another technique we can use, we see two movements in here. We see it moving back and forth this way, and we see a downward movement like that. So we'll just pull the brush down like that, and we get an interpretation there. So you can see that you can do that kind of analysis. You describe yourself what you're seeing, what is it doing in the way of the movement here and the way of value and color, and you can make it happen. Now we can do a similar thing. I don't want to make the quick tip too long, but I want to answer enough for this viewer so that this person can take this instruction and interpret anything really, but especially interpret what I'm seeing. The reflections are a part of what we're seeing visually. So we don't even try to make reflections. We just observe visually what it's doing visually, how is it moving visually, what kind of shape is it visually, what value and what color is it visually, and then when we tell ourselves what it's doing, that can help to define it. So then if we get to the rocks that are underwater, well, it's a little bit hard to tell the rocks underwater itself in that area right there. But let's look at what we would do. Let's see if we just go, we've got this darker version, that's reflection, I think. And by the way, shadows under the water, that's just value. So you're just looking for value differences. But let's go into it. Let's attempt to show you a little bit about what would happen in this little area right here. And now this says change, value change, color change. So this is in a darker range. It's not real dark. So how much darker something is, or how much lighter than how much lighter it is something else we need to discern. So we can tell here it's about what we're seeing there is about this value range. So this value range right here. All right, so I'm going to move darker. And what hue are we looking at? That's still that dark, kind of dark yellow green, may have a little bit of leaning a little bit towards blue. So I'll move over here. Let's do this. Let's get that a little bit desaturated first. And then let's go into this darker version. This is more yellow orange. And let's see that. Okay, that now is looking very, very dark. And let's see, is it too dark? If I compare it right here, yes, it's too dark. And then we would just lighten it. And lightening it with white works for this because it is it's desaturated, so white is going to subtract color out like white will often do. So let's see, is that, no, that is still a little bit too dark. So we'll add a little bit more of the white in there and get it just a little bit lighter. I'm just testing it out now. That's closer right there. All right, now watch what's happening there. That too is a movement that does this, but then it gets down here and it defines the edge of this rock right there. So the movement is this, but then when it gets here, it defines that edge. And notice there's something else going on there, and that is the dark here is blended with the lighter value here. So I'll just blend those, moving back and forth within each other just a little bit. It doesn't take much to get something blended. And now we see that blended. Now we have this happening, and then we have a light. And so piecemeal, like I'm doing this now, is not my favorite way to paint. This is just a study to guide you. The kind of study that you can do, just sort of practice what it is that you're seeing and what do you do with your brush and paint to make that happen. And so what I like to do is when I have an area like this, I like to go and build the dark part of it first and then build the light. And we see the dark of this is very much the same dark as that. So if I call it rock, it may throw me off. I might try to go to warmer browns or colors like that, but that's not what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing here is pretty much the same color and value that I'm seeing there. So when you're in that, I'm going to say it one more time, when you're in that analytical phase where you're simply discovering what you're looking at and you're discovering what you need to know about it, it's not the time to call it what you know it to be. You're just simply looking at it visually as a visual image that has visual elements. And so in this case then what I would need to do is let my brush make the shape that I'm seeing this dark shape to be. And some people would like to draw that first. I'll just sort of wing it for the moment. But we're sort of seeing it doing something like this, don't we? We sort of see, and then on this side of the shape, we sort of see it petering out just a little bit into this next shape. All right, so we see we already have that suggestion of rock by doing the dark first, which I always recommend, because when you do the darks first, you then give it structure. You have a structure that almost does the work for you. If you try piecemealing where you paint lights first and then, or if you, any other way, you don't get that exact reading of or interpretation of what you're looking at. Now what we're looking at there is, we're not looking at white, we're looking at an orange that is very desaturated and very light. And right up in here, we may just have something that we need there. Let's just see if we do. So I'm going to load this on the back of my brush. I'm going to put it here and say, oh, well, it needs a little bit, seems to me, a little bit of that yellow in it. So I'm going to pick up just a little bit of the yellow in it. Same volume. And let's see, does that do it? And I can just place that here. See, does that, that's a little bit not quite light enough. So I'm going to pick up a little bit more of the white. I just pick it up right here. The white. And mix it in there, and let's see, that's closer, see? So now if I shape that, I can just allow the brush to shape it just like that. The only thing that's missing is what to do with the edges. Now it's the combination of these things I'm just describing you and what you do with the edges that will show it and make it feel that it's underwater or above water. Above water, the edges are going to be clearer, they're going to be sharper. Underwater, those edges are going to be blended or more diffused. And so I'm going to now just take the edge of my brush and blend that. And then I'm going to take the edge of my brush and just sort of move this shape right into it. And I'll do the same thing. I'm wiping the brush off really, really good here. Like that. And then do the same thing here. We're just going to blend those edges using just the tip of the brush to blend that edge. And if I lose the shape like I did there, I simply just pull this down and sort of redefine it and blend it like that. So, and you can see how that now we get that feeling. Let's give that just a little. There we go. A little bit of just pulling the brush like that on top of it helps to create that movement that water makes when it sort of distorts an image. You'll notice that a lot of times that when you're looking at moving water, it will pick up color and bring color from one area into others. And so those kinds of things that we can do can then, just by following those simple instructions with those simple limitations, where you're not trying to do anything magnificent, you're simply observing the volume, the color, the shape, what's it doing, and where does it go according to what it's doing. So I'm going to stop there because I think the tip is probably already long enough. These tips are the kind of thing that you will learn when you practice them, just watching them for entertainment. Oh yeah, that's how we do that. Doesn't necessarily give you the experience. So if you go as soon as you can and find a photo where you have moving water moving over rocks, where there's a reflection on the water, just observe it the way I've guided you through here, and I think you're going to be absolutely thrilled at the results. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell,